Now, moving on to the next session. This session is about agencies. I mean, if there are any agencies on this call, if there are any agency owners listening to this session, I would suggest that you stick around for this one as well, because this session is about how to make sure that you secure your web agencies. It's about enforcing zero trust architecture for client websites. I know this might sound a little technical, but we have two amazing panelists who are going to take us through this amazing topic. So first of all, I would like to introduce Tessa. I would like to introduce Tessa Kriesel. Tessa, thank you so much for being here today with us. I'm so delighted and honored for you to be here and enlighten us with your knowledge and wisdom about security. For those of you, for those of you who wonder or who don't know who Tessa is, so Tessa, if you can give us a short introduction about yourself and enlighten us on what you are up to nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a developer by trade, started in Joomla, so a similar open source platform to WordPress, shifted into WordPress over time. Throughout my career, I have eventually shifted over to what is called developer relations. And that's working more with companies and products and helping developers find success within those products. Today, I am running my own business where I serve a variety of different clients in this space, and actually have two clients that fall into the zero trust sort of world. So pretty excited about chatting about that today.
Perfect. And we're excited to have you with us today, Tessa. And our next guest for this panel discussion is Aurelio Volle. He's a good friend of mine. I've met him a couple of times in different WordCamps, and I'm excited for Aurelio to be here. Aurelio, if you wouldn't mind, if you can just give us a short introduction about yourself and your company, WP Umbrella.
Of course. Nice to see you. Nice to be with you, Tessa, as well. So I'm Aurelio. I'm the CEO and co-founders of WP Umbrella, which is a WordPress management tool for agencies, so they can easily manage many websites, including like safe updates, backup, uptime monitoring, security monitoring from one place. And based on all what they do with WP Umbrella, we automatically send white label care report to their client so they can prove the value of WordPress maintenance. And I'm here because I'm not a tech expert like Tessa, but I'm speaking with agencies every day, and I can see so many things that are going wrong on the most basic layer as well of security.
Perfect. So, Tessa and Aurelio, I will be taking you through a list of questions around this topic, and I'm sure our audience would love to know your inputs on those topics as well. So, I would like to start off with zero trust. And zero trust obviously is a widely used security framework, right? I mean, many agencies might not fully understand it, and it's understandable as well because many agency owners are not technical, right? And how would you define it in a simple, non-technical way? I mean, we have a lot of agency owners on the call over here as well. I'm sure there are a lot of fans of Aurelio who are on this call listening to him at this moment. So, how would you define zero trust to these users who are not familiar with this term? Tessa, if you can, take us off with this one.
Yeah, for sure. It was really interesting because when I started getting into this space, I was like, zero trust, like that makes no sense. Why are we saying zero trust? Don't we want like 100% trust? But the idea of zero trust, right, is that we are never trusting anything. And so we are constantly verifying everything. And so that's how we think about zero trust, right? It's this idea of constantly double checking to make sure that maybe our doors are locked, or maybe it's a system that we have in our home security. Maybe we have Apple Home, right? And we're like, hey, every 30 minutes, just make sure the doors are locked. It's just a level of never trusting that everything is where it needs to be and always verifying to make sure that things are working as it should.
All right, perfect. Aurelio, do you have an opinion on this one? Do you have another definition?
No, I mean, very close to what you just said, Tessa. Actually, when I was trying to figure out how to explain this to people, I couldn't help but thinking about climbing. I'm a climber, and when you climb, you put your life in the hand of your climbing partner. And the first basic rule of security in climbing is to never trust the people who is belaying you. So you always double check. I have made those notes thousands of times, and I can do them with my eyes closed, but I never trust me, and I ask the person with who I'm climbing to never trust me as well. And that's what zero policy is about, because human, we make mistakes all the time, and that's the beauty of what we are, if I can say. And we need to have like basic, easy to follow policies to make sure that we mitigate the errors that we are doing on a daily basis. And I mean,
Perfect.
behind this very complex and frightening term like zero trust policy, it's just like to put in place some very easy mechanism to make sure that things are under control.
All right. I mean, it's hard enough to understand them what zero trust is. I can imagine how hard it must be for agency owners or small businesses to explain or to define or to elaborate the importance of having zero trust. So my next question is on the same line. I mean, how do you convince your clients, especially small businesses, that implementing zero trust is worth the effort and investment? I mean, Aurelio, if you can answer this one.
So the first thing to do is to remove the burden for them of implementing the zero trust policy. I mean, if you force them to activate 2FAs on their accounts, if you don't give them the right to some extent to add plugins or to do mistakes, then you have done 80% of the job. And I think nowadays with like banking apps, for instance, where you have like MFA every single time you want to do something, people are more used to these kind of things. And so the agency, she needs to, it's kind of security by design. You have to deliver a project with zero trust policy by itself as much as possible.
All right, Tessa, do you have a similar opinion on this one, or?
Well, I mean, yes, I think that that's really super important. I think sort of the maybe like a flip side to think about from this conversation is also, like showcasing what can happen if they don't have this in place, right? And so thinking about sort of that downtime costs, the days of lost revenue, liability risks, getting sued, that type of thing of, there's just all that goes into this where if someone can get into your site, get data, get customer data, get financial data, right? Like that's catastrophic. And so instead, I like to sort of think about like, not like the fear factor, but a little bit of fear factor. Like if you don't think about it, these are the things that can happen if you don't actually put these policies in place. And I feel like that's a strong place to come from. Obviously, just being able to, explain that and really just talking about, hey, how can we eliminate some of those different risks? So.
Yeah, I loved how both of your answers were on how you two operate in normal circumstances. So Aurelio said that he would want to remove the burden of implementing zero trust because he works in that line of where he wants to make it easier for his clients to implement not just zero trust but anything that they want to on their website. So that's exactly what his tool does. And you saying that you have to make sure that you completely translate and communicate the importance of it by telling them what happens if it's not implemented, right? So I loved how contrasting these two responses were. Aurelio, you were saying something before I started.
Yeah, like because with zero trust policy, it's not just a one-off actually. So you need to design it, in my opinion, by default, and then it's a constant reminder. Hey, don't open your laptop, don't type your password if someone is taking picture in the background. Like I was at WordCamp Asia last month, and everybody was working, and it was like so many photographers. I'm a bit paranoid, but as I should be, and I could see people doing some confidential stuff, or not really confidential, but with like private data on users, on people. And this is the kind of things that you cannot design with processes. And I agree with you, Tessa, you need to scare people. And I'm not into the fear business, to be honest, but you need to remind them, hey, this is a basic thing. Like, don't do this, because even if you don't have the intention, something bad might happen.
Yeah. I think both the ways are if not equally effective, are effective in ways, and depends on what the client is and who and how the client actually operates, right? I mean, it also varies from client to client how you communicate these things to them. So moving on to the next question, and it's more about security blind spots. I mean, what are some common security blind spots that agencies have when handling multiple client websites? And I'm sure, Aurelio, you work with agencies that have hundreds or 200s of different clients, right? And how does zero trust help eliminate them? I mean, how does zero trust policy helps agency owners who have multiple clients, or a number of clients, help them remove those blind spots?
Like the more in the end, it's all about the value you deliver to your clients and the trust you build along the way. So, I mean, there is client acquisition, of course, but there is also client retention.
Yeah.
And zero trust policy is a good way actually to keep your clients, because at one point, if the website is hacked, even though you have nothing to do about it as an agency because the flow was coming from your clients, then somehow you are liable, even though if it's not a contract liability, and the client will be pissed, and at some point he will leave. So having a strong security by design, zero trust policy implemented, training your clients, it's the best way actually to keep them. And on this, as a CPO of the WP umbrella, there is something that's always like does me. We have like 2FA on our application, and we have not made it mandatory. But when people log to the WP umbrella, we put like a giant red warnings. And I'm sure that if there is like the WP umbrella users in the room, they have seen this warning. And yet, so many people, they don't activate MFA on their WP umbrella account, and they are agency, and they know why security matter. They know better than their clients. And this is like something we really need to keep training people at. And I should do that with our agencies, and agencies should do that as well with their clients.
Yeah.
Because I mean, security, it's the core of everything we do. I mean, if your website is compromised, like what Tessa said, it's chaos.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that too, like when I was prepping for this and looking through the questions, I kind of had a couple different sessions where I laughed a little bit because I spent a great deal of time in agency life, right? Building websites. And I remember that we had a shared password across our company that if you couldn't get into something, try the shared password. That was sort of the common password. And it's like, I couldn't even imagine, like, if I were to come into an agency now, I'd be like, oh my gosh, are you crazy? Why are you doing this? But then, right, it was like we weren't in sort of these like more advanced days of really realizing and understanding. And obviously you evolve, and maybe there's still agencies that are doing that, right? Because you're moving fast, things are shifting fast, and you just need to make sure that everyone has access so they can get work done. I think another thing that is a really good highlight is like overly permissive access, right? So bringing in a contractor and just saying, hey, you're a super admin, do what you need to do. Does that person actually need super admin access? Can they work locally with a copy of the database? Do they really need access to the live, WordPress instance or site instance, whatever it is that you're working in? Also, like thinking about unmonitored third-party plugins, right? And so what does that look like? Do you have plugins that are unmonitored? One of the clients that I'm working with is actually in software signature space. And so that's actually a future advancement that I'm really looking forward to, starting to see in package managers where open source software actually has this software signing process. So you know exactly where that code came from, who that's associated to. And I think that's valuable. Obviously, we're not there in sort of the WordPress and all the website world, but I am excited for that world where we've got software signing from developers, from people committing code. And I think that thinking about sort of these third-party plugins and whatever code you're bringing into your website or downloading, et cetera, how can we automate that, right? How can we automate the update process? How can we build different types of pipelines using CI/CD, just a variety of other things that can come in? And again, I'm unfortunately, Aurelio, I'm not familiar with your product, but it sounds like your product helps with a lot of this stuff too. So those would be the things that I would immediately check. And then obviously real-time detection, just a lot of the things that Umbrella is offering, allowing you to kind of see what's into your space and just understand what's going on, and just never assume that someone needs that full access, that right access, that super admin access, whatever that might be.
Yesterday I was like attending a talk made by Oliver from Patch, I think, and he's speaking tomorrow. And he was saying to the crowd, like, hey guys, do you realize that when you install a plugin, you are just adding 20,000 lines of code to the website, and you have no clue about what you are doing? And he was very critical to some extent. I mean, he was not critical, but you know what I mean. And I think it's very like, it's what it is with plugins. And when you install a plugin, you must check like who is doing the code, who is behind. And there is like a whole business of hackers buying like outdated, non-maintained plugins to exploit hacks. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I move on to the next question, I just want to take a stroll in the comments section. I want to see what people are talking about, what questions do they have. So we do have a question though. It's from Anto, and they ask that what are the biggest challenges businesses face when adopting a zero trust security model? Tessa, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I can start, and I, obviously can jump in and add to that.
Yeah.
I think the things I talked about, right, is like that those shared credentials. Are there weak passwords? Is it overly permissive access? Are you not monitoring your code? What's coming in there? And I think that, when we talk about those biggest challenges, it's really a matter of sort of shifting your mindset, right? It isn't that, oh, I'm going to retroactively fix things, or I'm going to go back and adjust this. It's like you need to change how you operate fundamentally. There needs to be, 2FA, right? There needs all of sort of these zero trust things we're talking about. And so it is this idea of like taking a step back, looking at what you have going on. How many clients do you have from years and years ago? I remember having so many old client sites from that agency, and I could still get in with that master password, yet I saw employees come through that company and leave again. So that means that essentially that owner is trusting those old employees to never come in and sabotage what's happening. And that's just on the admin side, right? That's not even talking about the user side. How many bad users have been registered? What access did that have? Can they get into the admin to give themselves access? And so I think really like your first step is just kind of take a step back. What is that process for which you have that security? Think about zero trust, right? Never having access and constantly having to re-verify access.
Yeah.
Can you bring in like a single sign-on type of an architecture where if an employee is cut, their access is cut across the board? So anytime that you're actually getting into that admin or that important side of that site, can they even get access? And then code, obviously, that's a whole nother way to look at that too, but thinking about sort of where are you putting those code repositories? Are they private? Who has access to that? Who can write? And some of those things. So I've definitely lots of things to answer to this, but really just take that step back and think about that mindset shift and what things you need to start to adjust and change inside of your agency.
That's awesome. Aurelio, you want to add anything to this?
I think everything has been said. It's all about mindset, because in the end, enforcing like MFA, cleaning up admin rights, cleaning up users, having like an internal policy paper, enforcing like password management app. It's not burdensome, in the list of all the time-consuming tasks an agency is performing every day. Implementing like zero trust policy is actually very easy, and it just requires like a bit of discipline in the early days. And for this, you might want to scare people to circle back at what I was to what Tessa was telling before. Like at WP Umbrella, we are a very like agile company, and we are just like 6-7 people based on the job offer that are around. But in the onboarding, I do as a CEO, I spend like 20 minutes reviewing our tiny security policy, just so the new employees, they realize, okay, like those people, they pay attention to security. Because if this is just a one pager that's like left in the back of the room, what's the value, and you need to make people realize that security is and should be a major concern in your company. And if you think about it as an agency, how do you look like if you don't speak about security at all?
Yeah.
Nowadays.
Yep.
And if you come and say, hey, here are, pardon, these are our processes and they must be followed because this is how we should be working, there is value and you can build trust actually with your clients.
Awesome. That's very insightful, Aurelio. Now I want to talk about e-commerce and membership-based sites, right? I mean, there are completely different dynamics. I mean, they are differently in terms of managing. They are difficult to manage. They have more security concerns, especially e-commerce sites, right? Because they have people coming in, leaving their credit card information and addresses and other personal information over there as well. So I think it's more crucial for e-commerce and membership-based sites to have more solid security. So how can they implement zero trust without negatively impacting the user experience? Because specifically with e-commerce, it's very important to maintain that good user experience to ensure that the sales don't get affected, right? I mean, a lot of e-commerce owners, they're concerned with making sure that the checkout process is simple, that the add to cart process is simple, and to add that zero trust policy without negatively impacting the user experience. How can they do that? So Tessa, if you can start off with that one.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that, right? Like you're capturing and collecting a lot of private information. Member-based sites obviously can have communities and different private spaces, right, where folks are actually talking and engaging and sharing information. And e-commerce sites have credit card information and financial information. So it's incredibly important, and I can't reiterate this, that those sites are taking very seriously, and that you have, platforms like Umbrella and others that are coming in and actually helping aid in that process, right? Because they're so important. I think when it comes to user experience, right, like zero trust, that sort of the grunt of the difficulty there usually should fall on sort of that agency and the builder and the creator and the management side, right? But when you're looking at that user experience, there's a few different things that you can think about. And so thinking about sort of adaptive authentication, right? When do they need to actually re-authenticate versus when they don't need to re-authenticate? Session monitoring, right? Are they doing something different or strange or outside of sort of their normal types of behavior? Like, can that raise a flag versus saying, hey, you've been on here for an hour, we're just going to make you relog in? And really kind of diving into sort of like, what is it at which that we are monitoring for that does require that prompt for that authentication or that security layer? Granular access control also. So just thinking about sort of who has access to what, and can you associate that through different user accounts, just ensuring you've got sort of that access there. There's obviously a variety of things that can go into this in general. User experience, we obviously want it to be frictionless. We want them to be able to smoothly get through what they're getting through. But at the same time, when we can offer things that ensure that that customer also realizes and sees that their information is secure, I think that's really key. And so thinking about sort of like two-factor authentication or magicless passwords, right? Where you just go into your email, you validate, and you go back in. And again, coming back to single sign-on, it isn't always necessarily a use case that everyone can use. It tends to have some pretty sticky, expensive price tags behind it when you want to bring in a lot of these higher single sign-on platforms. But there is a variety of different opportunities there. And so when you bring in single sign-on for the user experience side, then again, you can sort of revoke where you need to and make sure that you're kind of covering what needs to be done there. And those usually bring in a layer of security too. Do you have an authenticator app? Are you using two-factor authentication? I know that sometimes we can get a little annoyed by those, but how do we bring those together so that it's a great experience, but yet they are, again, being verified when we need to verify, because we are zero trust, right? We never want to trust, but we want to ensure that we know that everything is still in its right place. I want to like share, deep examples here, but it is one of those things that like, you really have to be like sort of in the scenario to do it. But I do think I've seen a number of e-commerce sites that use like Okta or that use, some of these other authentication platforms, and seen a massive change in what that can actually do for their platform. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Aurelio, would you like to add something to this response?
I mean, that was very comprehensive, and I think I'm not an expert in WooCommerce or e-commerce website funnel and conversion, but showing that your website is safe. Actually, I think it's a good thing. I mean, it depends, of course, on the value of your baskets and the but it reflects on your brand as well. Like just like SSL certificates, like if you have an expired one, it looks bad. And if you can just like buy things, like as a user, there is something that's terrifying me. It's like on 95% of the websites, when I pay, my bank asks for confirmation. And on few websites, it's not happening because they are not up to date. And when this takes place, I'm so scared to go back on this website again to make a purchase. The zero trust policy shouldn't be seen as burdensome. It's a good way to actually build trust.
Yep.
I agree.
Awesome. So I would like to dive into the comments again before moving on to the next question. And we have a question from Danish who asks that enforcing multiple security layers strengthens protection, but it can also frustrate users, which is understandable. How can agencies strike the right balance between security and user usability for client websites? Aurelio, do you want to take this one?
I mean, it's a matter of balance, of course. And do we lose time every morning when we close our door? Yes. Do we still do it? Yes. And I think when it comes to digital agencies, they have like a key role to play in education. And I think, and it goes way beyond security because it applies also to WordPress maintenance. For instance, agencies that don't take the time, I mean, not all of them, of course, but they should take the time when they build a website to go way beyond than just building a website, because they are working for people whose job is not to build websites. And they are working for people who have not necessarily knowledge or will to investigate in this, time in this digital knowledge landscape thing. And it's their role as agency to explain them. And the earlier in the process, the better, regardless of the topic. It can be WordPress maintenance, it can be security, it can be the things that will come with the contract as well, renewing domain, how it's going to work, etc. The sooner in the process, they need to educate their users. Because once again, it's about the value you add to the people that are paying for your services. And everybody actually likes to be taught.
Tessa, anything you want to add to this?
I don't think so. I think that was a great answer. I think, when it comes to like the usability, right? I had spoke to that a little bit ago, right? So how can you verify, should they still be in the same situation, right? Can we do some type of monitoring for activity? Like, is there abnormal activity for a user? Is it based on a timeline of login? Sort of looking at some of those so that you aren't bugging people with those constant, like really annoying CAPTCHAs. Like, oh my gosh, the puzzles drive me crazy. Can you instead find ways, right, to authenticate that user and use some different technology to validate on that side? So, yeah.
Perfect. So moving on to the next question, and I would like Aurelio to sort of weigh in on that one. So many agencies, manage multiple clients from a single dashboard. I mean, obviously, Aurelio, you manage your tool is basically used to sort of manage clients for agencies, right? And many agencies manage multiple clients from a single dashboard. How can centralized security platforms like the WP umbrella help enforce zero trust across all sites?
I mean, it's not what we do, like we can allow agencies, we can warn them when they have like an outdated plugin, we can allow them to keep all their websites up to date. But once again, it means that they are selling a care packages to their client and that they have educated them from the very beginning on the stakes of why do you need to update plugin and what is WordPress security and why I am a better person as an agency to do this over you. And it's way worth the few bucks or dozen of bucks or hundred of bucks you are going to spend every month to keep your website fast, updated, up and running, and safe. So, I mean, I think zero trust policy is something so easy to do, and it's very linked to education, to have just a few processes in place. And if your agency doesn't have processes when it comes to security, to teaching security to your client, and I mean, when I mean processes, it can be a 5-item checklist. Did I tell my client to use unique password? Did I tell my client to activate MFA? Did I install a 2FA admin plugin on the WordPress website? You know, like very like basic things. You don't need like to overly complexify the situation. And that's it. And of course, with WP Umbrella, you can mitigate and improve the safety and the security of the website. And with WP Umbrella, you can update everything in one click, and we prevent like website from going down, and we alert you when you have a visibility, etc., etc. But I think in this session, it's not necessarily about like the right tech tool that can help you to harden your security. It's really about adopting the right mindset and the few items to check when you onboard a client to make sure that zero trust policy is implemented.
Perfect. Really insightful, Aurelio. My next question, Tessa, is for you specifically, because it's a scenario-based question. So let's say an agency, they suspect a compromised account on a client website, right? Can you like show us what a step-by-step process would look like, if they were to respond in a zero trust framework?
Yeah. Obviously immediately lock down that user, right? Like where did that user account come from? Can you identify who that user account was? Can you restrict that access? Can you do a forced logout? That's really super important. I think sometimes people like don't think about that, right? We can be logged in from our phone or from another device, but we need to actually force them to log out of all devices and then revoke that access. Then we want to investigate that breach, right? What happened? We want to understand what exactly happened. So looking through different log files, both inside of WordPress, log files on your server, just any form of sort of logs or any reporting that you might have to figure out, hey, what actually happened in this situation? From there, we obviously want to mitigate and secure. So once we understand what has happened in the breach or what may have happened in this compromised scenario, what caused that, and how do we go and actually address that and mitigate that? I think in most cases, like I was kind of laughing, someone, whoever NK Tolly is, he had replied back to my comment about I was working in an agency and there was a shared password, right? Where it was just constantly shared around, and it, sharing how like scary that is, right? And so thinking about what are those different things that have happened inside of that to make that happen, and how do we mitigate that? So platforms like Umbrella and otherwise, where you can bring a bunch of sites into a single dashboard is really key for that, right? To be able to go through and be able to mitigate and re-secure things like that, because it is really super important. Revoke permissions, right? Does someone have a permission that they shouldn't have? I would hope that folks will leave this panel and leave the security bootcamp being more proactive on these types of things versus reactive. But, we're talking about the scenario here. So in the reactive space, right, do we have to reset other passwords? As we're looking through that log file, is there some type of a situation if somebody got in and got access to a user account, they can likely get in and get access to super admin accounts or other types of accounts, maybe even the database, right? If they got in enough and they can go get the credentials and they can figure out how to get into that database, then they have all the data of everything they could ever want. And so really just thinking about that, enforcing multi-factor authentication. So, just like Ariella was saying, with Umbrella, and just really, again, addressing whatever it is that took place and happening, and then securing that. After that, it's deploying like this continuous monitoring process, right? And so I'd shared earlier about, automating your plugin updates. I think that's really key, especially in WordPress. Honestly, that is one of the biggest things that you can do to sort of deflect these scenarios, is by actually having these updates constantly being automated. Outside of that, right, it's like continuous monitoring. Can you start to monitor for unusual login? Can you monitor for what you actually saw? But the biggest thing about it is really understanding and knowing where to go to get the information. Do you know where those log files are? Do you know where those bits of details of trails, so that you can actually figure out what has happened in the site? I know that oftentimes in an agency, the person who gets that call is like the account manager or the project manager, whoever's like on that actual client account. And so they have to be able to be like, okay, let's have a conversation. Let's kind of calm that person down. Let's figure out what's going on. And so I think it's really important to not only have your technical team understand all of this, but also have your front of the sort of agency world understand this. What are the things that they can check for? Make sure that they understand the security measures in order to really truly have a zero trust infrastructure inside of your agency. Everyone has to be bought in and everyone has to be on board and everyone has to realize how serious it is, because it is somewhat annoying to be like, okay, let me pick up my phone and get into my authenticator app. But at the end of the day, it means that all of your clients are going to have a safer environment. And so it is really incredibly important on that, specifically on that admin side for sure. I think that's everything. I had like a couple little things I wrote down. Yeah, I think I mentioned everything. So IP.
Perfect.
Yeah, IP addresses, looking at that, right? If you've never actually tracked down like a user to their IP address, that's another thing too, because you can very frequently say, hey, this user is constantly logging in from this location versus, oh, wow, they've actually logged in from a different location. That's obviously concerning. So anyways, I'll digress there, but.
Perfect. That was very insightful, Tessa. So my next question is for both of you, actually. So some common vulnerabilities that agencies should check for right now on their clients' website. I mean, I'm sure a lot of agency owners are listening to this right now. What are some of the common vulnerabilities that they should check for right now on their client website, and how can they address them immediately? I mean, Aurelio, if you can start us off with this one.
I mean, I would start not even on the client side thing, but on their own critical stack, just to check with like puntpassword.com if they have been compromised, and just to review internally, like, do I have a proper unique password policy for the tool I use? And I think they should start with this. This said, when it comes to clients, the first things to do, obviously, is to review who has an existing access to the WP admin. Review the user. Maybe you have former employees. Maybe there are people you don't even know. And like Tessa said, check the log. Where are the visitors coming from? Because if you are operating a website in Portugal and if you have a very suspicious connection from another like continent or another country, this might give you a clue. And also to review like your stack of plugin, like very basic things actually that can make everything a bit safer. And I will tackle this later. Sorry.
No worries. You can continue, Aurelio.
It's somehow unrelated, but also they should review their zero trust policy regarding backups.
Okay.
How do they make backups? Where are the backups stored? Are the backups encrypted? And by doing so, they will first thing first realize that many backups plugin in WordPress leave so much trash on their server, which is bad for performance, but also that they might have like plugin with their vulnerabilities on the backup. They can have like so many things that can go wrong actually about your backup policy. And when it comes to managing your backups, you should have the same kind of security policy than when it comes to manage your website, when it comes to managing your websites. And that's just something I wanted to add, because I think backup can be a critical security flow, because in the end, you have all the data of the website in the backup, and this needs to be thoroughly thought. And please opt for like encrypted backup solution first thing first.
All right, Tessa, anything that you would like to add to Aurelio's answer?
Yeah, I mean, he had a great answer. I just have a quick list here, so I'll just kind of run through it. So if anyone's kind of taking notes, then they can sort of jot this down. Unused or outdated plugins and themes, right? Take them out. If you're not using a theme and you shift it over, you built a custom theme, take out the old themes, because something can happen with those old themes, especially if they're not the WordPress core ones, if they're owned by a different developer, right? Let's say they stop supporting the theme and someone hacks into that actual repository and is able to update a theme and then take out all the sites that have that theme on it. So Make sure you take out anything that's outdated, not being used, not activated. It doesn't need to be in there if it's not being turned on. Weak admin passwords, right? So checking for the actual weakness of the admin passwords. If you've got sites that are really old, WordPress didn't have that requirement to change those passwords, right? You could put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and you're good to go. And so looking at what those passwords are, a lack of multi-factor authentication to, two-factor authentication, just depending on how you look at it, on those admin accounts, get that turned on right away. Publicly accessible admin panel. So as we know it, it's WP-admin. Change that, redirect that. Don't make it the WP-admin URL so that it is harder yet to even find where you go and access that admin panel. On the backups, right? Already mentioned there, but I had the same thing. Like, where are those backups going? They should be automated and they should be off-site in a very highly secure location that has zero trust integrated into that. We talked about shared passwords. So we're talking about not even just weak passwords, shared passwords. Do not use shared passwords. Like, I cannot say that enough. And then just constantly checking that access, right? Like, I had a little note on here to mention the contractor thing, and I know I already mentioned it earlier, but it is so important because it's so easy for you to bring a developer in, or a designer, anyone in, right, into a project where you're trying to push forward and give them all the access because you're in a rush, but then making sure that that person doesn't have access later. So I think those are some of the very high level key things. Someone did add, passwords and emails. Woof, that's a rough one. Someone did use like a 1Password or I can't remember the other one, LastPass, right? If you're going to actually share passwords with clients, utilize some of these password management tools so that you can yet again revoke that through that password management tool or reset it through that tool. And then your company can constantly work within sort of a vault of passwords and revoke access accordingly. So that's kind of another addition. I did add and answer someone in the chat kind of talking about these like out-of-date plugins or not utilizing plugins. Actually, I do agree with you on LastPass. They had their own security problems all in their self. So good call out, JW. But long story short, so I did share in the chat about how I look at automatic updates, and I do think that they are key. But when you do update things, right, there's a whole nother level of security there too. We can't just automatically update plugins in your live production site. And so just really thinking about, are you utilizing an environment that has sort of this dev environment, this testing environment alongside of your live environment? You shouldn't be messing with things inside of your live environment. You should be updating in your dev environment, publishing to your test environment, and allowing that validation process to happen there, making sure your site is what it needs to be when you update, and then push all of that up right to your actual live or production servers. So, and there's a whole bunch that goes into that, and that looks at sort of your servers and your hosting companies and things. So as you're looking for different hosting partners, definitely look for those partners that have these security processes in place, that already have this ability to sort of automate the updates of plugins if it's not necessarily your technical specialty.
All right. Moving on to the next question, there is something that obviously it's the talk of the town nowadays, which is AI, of course. And since there are AI-powered threats becoming more, they're becoming more sophisticated. I mean, they're becoming more human. Because in the previous session we were discussing about bots and how AI bots are, behaving more like humans. So apart from bots, I mean, there are other threats that AI possesses in terms of website security. So how do you see the future of zero trust evolving for digital agencies? I mean, Aurelio, if you can answer this one.
I mean, that's the easiest one. It's going to be more and more important. To give you a quick example, you can replicate the landing page, the front end of the landing page of WP Umbrella with like V0 in like one prompt, and then you have a fake landing page, and then you start to do some Google ads on our domain, which is something that happened to us, which is why we've tried to enforce MFA across multiple accounts. And then you can steal credentials to people, and you end up having like access to many websites. And it happened to us, it happened to Manage WP. Everybody can make like super credible fake landing page in like 1 minute with AI. And we have like smart bots, and actually security, the more complex are the technical challenges of security, the more important the zero trust policy become, because in the end, the flow is almost always the human one.
All right, Tessa, anything to add?
I wouldn't say that there's anything sort of like, monumentally like insightful to add there. I will say though, is like I've had a lot of different like AI types of clients recently, been diving into sort of the AI and ML space. And it is absolutely wild to see what artificial intelligence can do
Mm,
and how it continues to advance every single day. I mean, like it can build like infrastructure for us, right? Like complete software solutions in some cases. I'm not saying they're good, but they can do wild things. And so I think this is really just this key time. If you are not thinking about zero trust and you are not having this zero trust mindset inside of your agency, like now is absolutely the time. Obviously the time was yesterday, but we are here and we are in the world that we are in today. But just really thinking about that, because they can get in and they can change and shift, and they're computers, right? They're going to be able to operate and do things a lot
yeah,
quicker than we can and identify things a lot faster than we can. And so they'll just have one barrier and then they'll get past it, and have another and they'll get right past it. And the thing about thinking of that too is that I know oftentimes in agencies, you can start to think like, oh, well, we just have small clients. They're just marketing websites. They're just here for information. It doesn't matter, because if that marketing website goes down and that's a part of their revenue flow or how they operate or how they exist with their customers, it's still just as fragile and needs just the same approach as a e-commerce or a membership site or a site that's for Disney.com, right? Like it all matters. And so bringing in zero trust is like so incredibly important in today's world with AI for sure.
And it's
perfect. That was
easy.
awesome, Tessa. Yeah, Aurelio, you were saying something.
Pardon, and it's easy. Like,
Yep.
don't make yourself something so big out of it, because it's so easy to implement. You just need to switch your mindset.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Perfect. So, folks, final question from both of you from on this panel. So, if an agency could take just one step today to move towards zero trust security, what should it be? Tessa?
Ooh, this is a loaded question because it depends on the scenario which they're in, right? If you're still using a shared password, that's probably a good start. But I mean, I think that there's a variety of things depending on sort of what level you're at. Excuse me. I think really it's that mindset shift. How can you as an entire team sit down and have a conversation about what it would take to reach a zero trust state, right? And
Yeah.
so we've shared a lot of different things throughout this conversation, but I think the biggest thing is actually getting everybody on board, because if everyone is not on board, I could very well see where there's like a UX designer that's working with the QA tester that's like, "Oh, hey, here's the password." And it's like, "No, we just don't even do that." Even though they are on the same team and they are right next to you. What if that QA person gets terminated at the end of the day because of something that happened, right? There just can't be this level of sort of sharing and just being kind to your employee, to each other, right? And so it really needs to be, we all need to go zero trust, and we all need to take these steps to protect ourselves and to protect our clients.
Perfect. Aurelio, last thoughts.
I agree very much. I would just say two things. Set up a meeting tomorrow to discuss your security policy and show your people that it's not something nice to have. It's a red line and it shouldn't be crossed, first thing first. And then it can be like actually easy to implement, like force MFA and force the usage of a password management app, so people will have like unique password, because people are lazy. And if they can just create like unique password in one click, then they will do so,
Yeah.
Just like basic things that must be implemented, and that must be implemented like thoroughly and strongly. Like security is not like something nice to have.
Yeah, it's a must. It's a necessity. All right, I would just again take a look at in the comment section. I think we do have a couple of questions before I wrap up this session. I want to take questions from the audience. So Joshua Ezekiel has a question. What about in-browser password managers? Like, are they safe? Like, should we use them? Yeah, but Tessa, anyone can take this one.
I was going to say I actually started typing an answer.
Okay.
Password managers are absolutely not zero trust. So let me reiterate that. I mentioned password managers because somebody was sharing a password in an email, and I was like, at least utilize a password manager when you're doing that. But when you think about a password manager, right, they have vaults, and you can have internal company vaults, and you can have employee vaults and all the sort of things, and you can have a team set up. But at the end of the day, unless you are consistently revoking access to things in a zero trust mindset, password managers are not considered zero trust. And so I do think that, yes, they are more secure. It is an important tactic on a personal side of your own password, right? If you have access into something, or if you need to share something that is a one kind of password, but it is absolutely not a zero trust technique. And so that's what I really want to reiterate, is that if you're going for zero trust, a password manager is more of a support, right? So thinking about more on the single sign-on is going to be more along the lines of that zero trust. Because if you do that, right, with a single sign-on, you're giving, say, one employee access to a variety of different things, maybe social account, maybe their website, maybe whatever it is that you're bringing into sort of that single sign-on. And that's a better process. But at the same time, in agency life, we all know that we're scrappy, we're moving fast, we have all these different things. And so really what needs to be done is having a conversation around, what is the password manager doing for us? And is this truly zero trust? And the answer is likely it's not. But what can we do, and how can we alleviate this and shift outside of that world? So kind of a deeper, wider conversation there, but that's my answer.
Perfect. Aurelio, do you think on the same lines?
100%.
Perfect. So there is another question on password sharing as well. So Matt has asked about, one password and LastPass. So like, are they pointless? Like, do we use them to some extent, or should we just abandon these password sharing tools?
I wouldn't say abandon them, because I use them on my personal level, because I make sure that I am frequently adjusting my passwords. So the nice thing about a password manager is, like, on your individual level, right? When you're going into a site, we want to constantly be creating extremely complicated passwords, right? Something that somebody can't guess. And that's what those password managers are helpful for. And so I think there's a difference between managing your own passwords and then sharing passwords. Password managers are amazing for managing your own passwords when they are secure, when they are trustworthy, when they are used correctly, versus utilizing them as oh, hey, let me just share the super admin password for the website, right? Not what you want to be utilizing them for.
I would water down a bit. I mean, you need like unique password, and from time to time you need to share a password. And actually, like this kind of a shared vault, they are in the philosophy of zero trust policy, because you need to have access to the dedicated vault. So it must be like compartmentalized, if this word exists in English, like separated. So not everyone should have access to every password, and you would need the password to access the password. And so in the end, it's way better to have this than nothing. And from time to time, you are paying just one license for a tool, and you need to share the password. What is important is to make sure that the people that can access this shared password have the right to access this shared password, and so that they are identified before having access to the vault. That's what I think. I think we are saying somehow the same thing, but just like at least there is some kind of verification, and it's way better than the pizza. I called it like the pizza password post-it on your office, so yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tessa, and thank you, Aurelio. I think this panel discussion was extremely insightful, and I hope that agency owners who are listening to this would have learned a thing or two about managing their security for themselves and for their clients as well. As for you folks, I would like to thank every one of you who have been here throughout this day, listening to our sessions and commenting and asking questions. I would again like to thank Tessa and Aurelio for being here today. And with that, I would also like to give a shout out to WP Umbrella, who have been our partners and supporters throughout this event and making sure that this event, takes place successfully. I think this is pretty much it from the panel discussion. Thank you, Aurelio. Thank you, Tessa. I wish you all the best for your current and future projects. And until then, we will see you later.